Alright, so Wheel of Time wrapped up, and I figured I would do a video talking about it. In a sentence, I will say I don't think this series had enough. And when I say I don't think it had enough, I mean enough of everything. They didn't have enough budget, they didn't have enough time, they didn't have enough effects. They didn't have enough time with the characters. We didn't have enough time to get to know the setting. We didn't have enough. There just wasn't enough in this first season. The setting never really got past the initial problem I was thinking of, where it fails to feel authentically old in some ways, and none of the stuff feels like this world is lived in. It all feels just a bit too clean and pristine, and this was noticeable, especially considering that a new season of The Witcher came out, and yeah, this does actually look like a world that was lived in, whereas The Wheel of Time kind of didn't. And that was a persistent problem throughout my watching of the Wheel of Time show. None of this really felt old. None of this felt like it had been weathered. Everything felt too new, too pristine. Beyond that, I didn't feel like there was enough time to really get to know any of the characters all that well. I mean, this is clearly an issue with the amount of time they were given. It was only 8 episodes, and for a book as long as The Eye of the World, that's really not a lot of time. For reference for how long the Wheel of Time books can be, there is a chapter in the last book called The Last Battle. That chapter is as long as the first Harry Potter book. I feel like there's like a very obvious solution to this, though. We saw this with the Expanse adaptation. Don't do the entirety of the first book. Just do part of it. At most, this season of television should have ended with Rand and Matt getting to Camelin. And if you've never read the books, they actually go to Camelin, not Tarvalin. And they're both just cities, and I suppose it doesn't matter on the whole which one they go to, but that's what it feels like to me. You should have just done part of the story, like the first season of The Expanse, because the opening and getting us to understand this world is far more important than finishing the story in one go, as far as I'm concerned. So that's what I would have changed about this. The effects continued to look kind of iffy throughout the entirety of it, where they basically kind of looked unfinished by the last episode. And even the small glimpses we got of the Age of Legends, with the second coolest person to ever call themselves Dragon.
It's more of a demonstration, really.
Lose Theron, felt like this was kind of not a lived-in world. So, yeah, that's my major criticism. They tried to do too much, and this world does not feel lived in. But anyone can criticize how something just happened. What would I do to recover from this? Because a show could easily recover from a bad first season. What would I do to fix the show from here? Well, first off, I would just kind of not explain the recasting of Matt. Just sort of roll with it. I know that there was problems with this, but don't have any sort of in-universe bullshit reason why Matt looks different than what we remember him. One of the better things the MCU has trained people into thinking is to just roll with whatever. They only kind of pretend to have a plan, people.
Fake.
And secondly, I would slow it down a bit. There's some pretty infamous parts of this series called The Slog, about halfway through the series, where a lot of nothing tends to happen. You can skip over some of that if you're adapting some of these things, but I'm fine with watching half a book turned into an entire season, especially in the early ones where it really matters. So I would say that they really need to take their time with the next season. They need to slow down the pacing a bit and give us time to breathe with these characters more. It has the unfortunate look about it of being kind of, what's the word for it? Misogynistic? I don't know. All the men in this show kind of suck. Perrin is a useless fool. Rand just sort of goes along with everything. And they really did Matt dirty again. I don't like the changes. I don't like the changes at all. I was rereading the series, and Matt flat out said, and Matt and Tam flat out say that there is no more honest person in Emmons Fields than Abel Cawthon, which is why Matt is so different. And I just really don't like the changes to his entire family dynamic.
You're going to be just like your dad. I know it. Damn prick like him.
So, I mean, start treating the men a little bit better. This plays again into the mythological elements that they're drawing upon here, in which, alright, so a lot of the Wheel of Time stuff, the characters are meant to be based off of a lot of different mythological characters, multiple ones, and they're condensed into one person. So, for example, Arthur Hawkwing is both Alexander the Great and King Arthur. But the way that they're playing with, like, the Lews Therin in this right now is his story has always been closer to Prometheus than it was Adam and Eve. Lews Therin was right in the Age of Legends. So them treating it like it was his arrogance and his overconfidence that really led to this entire thing, that's kind of not really how the story ever really made it out to be. This was our plan. It wasn't great, but the alternative plan was far worse. I don't know. There's just like this weird undercurrent where they're treating all the men in this show like they're like absolute garbage. And like, I'm usually not one to complain about this. I actually think people overdiagnose this kind of thing way too frequently, but it is noticeable. So, yeah, going forward, slow the fuck down, start treating the men right, and don't acknowledge the casting changes, just make the change.
What do you see now? Why you look at me?
Rainbows and carnivals and 3 beautiful women.
And at least one of them is just oh so humble.